President Trump's removal from most social media platforms brought about a variety of reactions, including from the one and only Matt Stoller, who wrote in a New Guardian article, quote, "The ability of democratically unaccountable monopolies with extraordinary control over communications infrastructure to silence political speech is exceptionally dangerous."
He's not the only one here saying these things. Angela Merkel, also the Chancellor of Germany, is considering the move, quote, problematic. Joining us to discuss radicalization of Americans on social media and more, author and research director at American Economic Liberties Project, Matt Stoller, himself good friend of the show. Good to see you, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So just give us your general reaction to much of this. I cited one of your tweets in my radar, I think on Monday, just in the general reference that actually it was many Republicans who stood in the way of trying to break up Facebook and more. Is that the answer? What is the answer to much of what we see going on right now in these really tough times?
Yeah, so there's two problems that are interacting with one another. One is you've protected these companies you've shielded lots of illegal activity by these companies through Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which says that whatever happens on these platforms is not the platform's fault. So even if they know that really bad things are happening or even encourage bad things from happening, they are not liable. So that's that. You got a lot of illegal activity going on, including, organizing scams and violent, gangs and whatnot. And that the riot was a consequence of that. And the other problem we have is these are monopolies. And you have to fix both problems, because if you say, monopolies, you guys have to carry everything and we're going to break you up, but you don't fix the Section 230 problem, that when you're effectively saying is you have to carry a bunch of stuff that's really bad content, illegal stuff, violent stuff. And if you only fix the Section 230 piece, then the monopolies can still use arbitrary and coercive power to silence people they don't like or to get political favors. So what you have to do is you have to say stuff that's illegal is illegal. Right? You're no longer going to be shielded from the law, right? Trespassing, negligence, things like that. And then at the same time, we're going to break you up and we're going to say that if you have essential infrastructure, you have to carry everyone. So you can't just silence people arbitrarily. But at the same time, look, if people are doing things it's illegal, incitement, whatever, then it's illegal, right? So that's the way to deal with the problem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what did you make, Matt, of, so there was a lot that happened, obviously. Trump was banned from Twitter, Facebook, his Shopify removed, all those things happened. But then you also had Parler that was first removed from all the app stores, and then Amazon actually pulled their web services so they effectively couldn't operate at all. What did you think of that chain of events in particular?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, somebody noted, they were like, what's the problem with having him on Shopify? Like, is it an issue if he sells more red hats? Like, who cares, right? That's just clearly trying to push a certain political point of view, which is held by millions of people, out of public life and into the, into sort of some dark area. It's sort of an attempt to say you're not part of society, even though we live in a representative democracy. So I find that frightening. Parler, yeah, they were excluded. AWS said you can't use our servers. Google and Apple both said you can't use our app stores. And then they've had trouble finding other places to go. A lot of their vendors have said, no, we're not going to work with you anymore. And this is really dangerous. I mean, this is just choosing, because first of all, Parler is a conservative social network, but most of the stuff that happened to organize the riots, which of course were really bad and people should be prosecuted and Trump should be impeached and so on and so forth. This stuff's dangerous, but most of it was organized on Facebook. Most of it was organized on Twitter. This is, what Parler is doing is the only reason they're being singled out is because they're conservative, not because of anything that happened on Parler. So this is different than trying to address the riots. This is just saying we don't like conservatives and we are going to use our commercial power, the political power that we have through holding essential facilities for commerce to punish a specific political faction.
Right. Well, that's the important part of what you just said. You called it essential facilities for commerce. So what about the free market, Matt? That's what a lot of liberals are now saying. They're like, this is the free market in charge. Twitter has the right to do whatever it wants. So does Stripe. Stripe doesn't have to host anybody. Neither does Shopify. What's your answer to that?
Well, look, I mean, the idea that private businesses get to serve whoever they want, absolutely, they have the absolute right to serve whoever they want, only exists in very narrow circumstances. It's never been sort of true broadly. For thousands of years, we've had what are called common carriage rules, which say that certain public-facing businesses have to serve all comers. This has been true with railroads and telegraphs and whatnot. But it was also true in the Civil Rights Act in '64 when they said, hey, restaurants and hotels, you can't exclude people based on race. You don't have the right to serve anyone you want. So this idea that there's a kind of, you can serve anyone you want and not serve anyone you want is just like a very libertarian point of view. It's very unusual. It's not part really of our political tradition. And it's dangerous because you can use that to exclude all sorts of people. Usually it's used to exclude marginalized groups. But the way that we've said we're going to address dangerous activities is we make dangerous activities illegal. And that's because we want to make public choices about the kinds of activities that are tolerated in a free society, not private arbitrary choices.
Yeah. And Matt, one of the ideas or solutions that's been offered is basically to treat some of these gigantic platforms as if they're public utilities and regulate them in that manner. What does that what does that mean? What does that practically look like?
Yeah. So the House Antitrust Subcommittee report, which came out a couple months ago on big tech, basically said that it looks like net neutrality, only applied to big tech platforms. So it says if you have market power, and there are some technical details to work through, but if you have market power and you are an essential service for commerce, then you have to give everybody equal access on equal terms. You don't have to give them, if you need to use a lot more of the service, they can charge you more, obviously. But they can't, like you and I can each buy Verizon service for the same price, the same plans. Verizon can't say, oh, I don't like your politics, Matt. I'm not going to sell you phone service. Right. That's essentially what we would do for these essential facilities. And you'd have to define them and whatnot. But it's not hard. We've done this pretty much with every industrial sector that we've had in our economy. And there's no reason we couldn't do it with these large technology platforms. Now, the irony here is that Ken Buck, who was a Republican on the antitrust subcommittee and agreed with a lot of the findings and said we do need to strengthen antitrust laws, did actually disagree with that portion of the report and said, no, we don't want the government picking winners and losers. I hope he reverses himself on that because we actually don't want Amazon picking winners and losers because that's way more arbitrary. But that's the kind of debate that we need to have. But at the same time, you need to make sure that there's a bunch of really dangerous stuff happening that is now shielded because of Section 230, and you have to get at that. So you can't just say we're going to let toxic stuff happen online and then we're going to force everybody to carry that toxic stuff. You got to get rid of that toxic stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
A good point.
Thank you, Matt. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Matt.
Thanks a lot.
Coming up, Andrew Yang is facing some backlash. We're going to tell you about that when Rising returns.